Sir, can I eat with you? The air inside Aurelia, the city's most coveted restaurant, was thick with the scent of opulence, a heady mix of beeswax, aged leather, and the delicate aroma of truffle oil. A string quartet played softly in a distant corner, its melody a tasteful soundtrack to the clinking of crystal silverware and the hushed, important conversations of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like frozen waterfalls onto tables draped in pristine white linen. At a secluded corner table, Julian Vance sat alone. At 35, he was the archetype of modern success, a self-made billionaire with a portfolio that shaped skylines and a gaze that had grown weary of luxury. The plate before him held a perfectly seared Wagyu steak, a culinary masterpiece that cost more than most people's weekly groceries, yet it sat almost untouched. He had just closed a nine-figure deal that morning, a victory that should have felt exhilarating, but instead left him with a familiar, hollow ache. He swirled the deep red wine in his glass, a vintage older than he was, and felt nothing. Outside the grand wrought-iron gates of Aurelia, a starkly different reality unfolded. A little girl named Lily shivered in the encroaching night chill. She couldn't have been more than 7, a tiny, fragile figure swallowed by a tattered, oversized hoodie. Her bare feet were numb against the cold pavement, stained with the city's grime. A visceral, gnawing hunger twisted in her stomach, a pain so constant it had become a part of her. For over an hour she had watched the silhouettes of diners through the great glass windows, a pantomime of a life she couldn't imagine. A waiter in a starched uniform emerged, carrying a tray heavy with half-eaten bread rolls, discarded shrimp cocktails, and steak trimmings. He walked briskly to a bin in the alley. Lily's heart leapt with a desperate hope. She crept forward. "Get out of here," the waiter snapped, seeing her approach. He shooed her away with a disgusted flick of his wrist as if she were a rat drawn to the scraps. "Don't even think about it. This is a high-class establishment, not a shelter for street vermin." Lily flinched as if struck, her eyes stinging with tears as she retreated back into the shadows of a stone pillar. But the hunger was a relentless beast. It pushed past the shame and fear. Through the main doors, which had swung open for a departing couple, she spotted the man sitting alone. Before him lay a feast, untouched steak, golden brown rolls, roasted vegetables, and even a small, glistening chocolate lava cake. Her mouth watered painfully. "Just ask," she whispered to her trembling self, the words of fragile prayer. "The worst he can say is no." Summoning a reserve of courage she didn't know she possessed, she slipped through the doors. Her bare feet were silent on the polished marble floor. An immediate cold silence fell over the nearest tables. Conversations faltered. "Good heavens, where did that come from?" a woman draped in pearls whispered to her companion. "Is there no security?" a man grumbled, adjusting his tie. The restaurant manager, a tall man with a perpetually severe expression, moved toward her with the predatory grace of a shark. His polished shoes clicked angrily on the floor. "Little girl, you do not belong here. You need to leave, now." But before he could reach her, Lily fixed her large hazel eyes on Julian. "Sir," she said, her voice a tiny, trembling thread in the heavy silence. Julian looked up from his phone, startled out of his stupor. The little girl's frail form was a shocking, heartbreaking anomaly against the backdrop of polished mahogany and glittering crystal. "Sir," she repeated, taking one more brave step forward. "Can I eat with you?" The manager froze mid-stride. Every fork was suspended in mid-air. The entire restaurant held its breath. Julian simply stared. His mind, usually a fortress of numbers and strategies, utterly blank. "Please," Lily added softly, her small hands twisting the frayed hem of her hoodie. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." "Sir," the manager said, his voice a venomous hiss, "do you want me to have her removed?" Julian didn't answer right away. His gaze was locked on Lily's sunken cheeks, her chapped, quivering lips. In that moment, the polished veneer of his life cracked open. A memory, buried for decades, rushed back with stunning clarity. A boy, not much older than her, shivering on a Chicago street corner, smelling the hot dogs from a vendor's cart, so hungry his stomach felt like it was eating itself. He remembered the profound sting of being invisible, of people looking right through him as if he were nothing more than a piece of trash on the sidewalk. No one had helped him then. "Sir," the manager pressed, impatient, "shall I call security?" "No," Julian said. The word cut through the air, sharper and louder than he intended. It held a steel edge that he hadn't used for anything but hostile takeovers. Every head in the room turned toward him. Julian pushed his chair back and stood to his full height. "Bring another plate," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority that had nothing to do with money. The manager blinked, flustered. I beg your pardon, sir?" "You heard me," Julian said, his eyes never leaving Lily's. "Bring your finest plate, and make it quick." Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" she breathed. "Yes. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," she answered, the name itself a whisper. Julian knelt, bringing himself down to her level, an act of deference that stunned the onlookers. "Come on, Lily. Sit with me." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the room. Is he serious? A billionaire dining with a beggar child? This is disgraceful. Julian ignored them all. He pulled out the plush velvet chair beside his and patted the seat. "Sit down, sweetheart. Tonight, you are my honored guest." As Lily cautiously climbed into the chair that seemed to swallow her whole, Julian turned to the still-frozen waiter. "And bring a basket of your warmest bread first. She's cold." The waiter, utterly mortified, scurried away to do his bidding. Julian cast a sweeping, cold glance at the other diners, their faces a mixture of judgment and morbid curiosity. "You're all staring," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Perhaps you should be asking yourselves why a 7-year-old child has to beg for food in a city with so much wealth." The restaurant fell into a profound, shamed silence. When the bread arrived, Lily's small hands cradled a warm roll as if it were a precious jewel. A tear traced the clean path through the grime on her cheek as she took the first hesitant bite. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I thought no one cared." A tight knot formed in Julian's throat. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the hollow ache in his chest was replaced by something else, something warm and fiercely protective. "Slow down," he said gently, pushing a glass of water towards her. "There's plenty more. You don't have to rush." The waiter returned, this time with a large plate piled high with roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. He placed it before Lily with a new, awkward reverence, refusing to meet her eyes. "Eat as much as you want," Julian encouraged. "No one is going to stop you." As she ate with a quiet, desperate focus, Julian leaned back. He watched her, and in her he saw the ghost of the boy he had been. He had spent his entire adult life building an empire, a fortress of wealth to keep that boy's memory at bay. But looking at Lily, he realized he hadn't escaped his past. He had only imprisoned himself in a gilded cage. Lily wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "My mama used to hum when she baked bread," she said softly, a fleeting smile touching her lips, "before she went to heaven." The knot in Julian's chest tightened. "And your dad?" Lily's face fell. Her voice cracked. "He left after Mama got sick. He said I was too much trouble. He said someone else would take care of me." She stared down at her plate.
but no one did. A sharp, unbearable pang of pain shot through Julian's heart. He pushed his own plate away and reached across the table, gently taking her small, sticky hand in his. "You are not too much trouble," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "You are a child, and you deserve the world, Lily. You deserve to be cherished." Around them, the world had shifted. A couple at a nearby table were dabbing at their eyes. Even the severe-faced manager, who had returned to observe, now stood motionless, his hard facade crumbling. He looked up, addressing the silent room once more. "She's 7 years old," he said, his voice tight with an emotion he could no longer contain. "We've spent years. She's 7 years old. She's been sleeping in alleys while we debate the merits of a $10,000 bottle of wine. We post on social media about charity, but when a real, breathing child asks for help, we ask security to throw her out." He looked directly at the woman in pearls. "Do you know how much courage it takes for a child to walk into a place like this, to face all of you and ask for a simple meal? It's more courage than I've seen in any boardroom." No one spoke. Guilt was a palpable presence in the air. Julian turned back to Lily, his voice dropping to a gentle whisper meant only for her. "You will never have to beg again, Lily. Not ever. I'm going to take care of you." Lily looked up at him, her hazel eyes wide and shining with unshed tears. "You mean you're not sending me away?" "Never," Julian said, his voice cracking. "You're coming with me. We'll get you warm clothes, a soft bed, and tomorrow we're having the biggest stack of pancakes with extra whipped cream for breakfast. How does that sound?" A small, choked sob escaped her, and she launched herself from her chair, throwing her tiny arms around his waist and burying her face in his expensive suit. "I'll be good. I'll be good," she cried into the fabric. "You already are good, sweetheart. You don't have to prove a thing." A quiet snivel broke the stillness. The woman in pearls was now openly weeping into her napkin. The room had been silenced, not by power, not by wealth, but by a single, profound act of compassion. Julian stood, effortlessly lifting Lily into his arms. "She deserves more than a meal," he said to the room at large. "She deserves a life." As he carried her out of the restaurant, diners rose to their feet. It wasn't a protest. It was a silent, standing ovation of respect. The gruff businessman who had scoffed earlier left $200 bills on Julian's table. On a napkin, he had written, "For her new beginning." Later, in the plush leather passenger seat of his Rolls-Royce, Lily was curled up, wrapped in a cashmere blanket from the back seat. "Are you rich, sir?" she asked sleepily. Julian looked at her, then at his own reflection in the dark window. He didn't see the titan of industry. He just saw a man holding a little girl. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "I thought I was, Lily, but tonight I finally feel like I have something worth more than all the money in the world." Lily gave a sleepy smile in return. "You're the kindest person I've ever met." Tears pricked at the corners of Julian's eyes. He had been called powerful, brilliant, and ruthless, but kind felt like the greatest accolade he had ever received. "And you, Lily," he said softly, his voice full of a new, unfamiliar warmth, "are the bravest little girl I have ever known."
The Rolls-Royce glided through the night, so silent it was almost soundless, with only the soft hum of the engine and the golden glow of streetlights streaking past the windows like dying comets. Lily was curled up on the plush leather seat, Julian's cashmere blanket wrapped around her like a protective cocoon. Sleep was a heavy weight on her eyelids, but she fought against it. She was afraid that if she closed her eyes, she would open them again in the cold alley, and this kind man and his warm car would have been nothing more than a beautiful, fleeting dream. Julian glanced over at her, recognizing the silent struggle. He eased his foot off the accelerator. "It's okay, Lily," he said gently, his voice low and reassuring. "This is real. You're safe now. You can sleep if you want to." "You won't leave me, will you?" Her voice was a tiny whisper, a question that carried the weight of every abandonment she had ever endured. Julian's heart clenched. He took one hand off the steering wheel and placed it gently on her shoulder. "Never, Lily, I promise. From now on, you'll never have to be alone again." That promise seemed to be all she needed. Lily nodded, and just a few minutes later, her breathing deepened into a steady, peaceful rhythm. She had fallen asleep, truly asleep, for the first time in a very long time, without fear as her companion. They arrived at a tower of glass and steel that clawed at the night sky, a monument to wealth and power. Julian drove into a private underground garage, and a private elevator whisked them directly up to the penthouse apartment on the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, Lily, who had been half asleep in Julian's arms, woke completely. Before her was a space so vast it seemed impossible. The floors were polished white marble that shone like a mirror, and the glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a panoramic view of the glittering city below like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was minimalist, luxurious, and empty. The silence here was different from the silence of the alley. It was an opulent, cavernous silence, almost frightening to a little girl accustomed to the constant noise of the street. Julian saw her hesitation. "Don't worry," he said. "This is a home, and a home is a place for being ourselves, not for worrying about a little dirt." He smiled. "And the first thing a home should do is help us feel clean and warm. Would you like to take a bath with lots of bubbles?" Lily's eyes lit up. A bath. She only knew the sting of cold water from public spigots. The thought of sinking into warm water was an unimaginable luxury. She nodded shyly. Julian led her to a bathroom larger than the corner of the alley she had once called home. Everything was marble and gleaming chrome. He fumbled for a moment. He could command a boardroom of 50 executives, but he was completely at a loss as to what to do with a 7-year-old in a bathroom. He turned on the faucet, checking the temperature 5 times to make sure it wasn't too hot, then poured a generous amount of lavender-scented bath gel into the tub. White bubbles quickly frothed up, soft as clouds. I'll be right outside the door," he said, feeling a little awkward. "Just call me if you need anything." He handed her a towel that was the thickest and softest thing she had ever touched, and closed the door. He leaned against it, listening to the soft splashing and Lily's quiet gasp of delight. In that moment, Julian felt a connection, a sense of profound responsibility that ran deeper than any contract or business deal. A little while later, Lily called out, "Sir, I'm done." Julian opened the door. A completely different little girl stood before him. Her wet hair was slicked back, revealing a delicate, heart-shaped face. Her skin, washed clean from the street's grime, was pink and soft. She was wrapped in the enormous towel, looking like a tiny bird in a cozy nest. Now came the problem of clothes. Julian's penthouse was filled with designer suits and silk shirts, but nothing suitable for a 7-year-old girl. He opened his walk-in closet, looking around helplessly. Finally, he pulled out his most expensive t-shirt, one made of linen and cashmere, soft as spun silk. "You can wear this for now," he said. "It'll be a little big. Tomorrow we'll go buy you a whole store's worth of clothes." Lily put on the t-shirt. It came down to her knees like a nightgown. She looked shyly up at Julian, her cheeks flushed. "It's so soft," she whispered, stroking the fabric. Julian led her to one of the guest bedrooms, a room that was cold and sterile from never having been used. He pulled back the thick duvet on the king-sized bed. "You can sleep here tonight, is that okay?" Lily climbed onto the bed, disappearing into the mountain of down pillows. She looked around the vast room, then back at Julian with her clear, honest eyes. "Is all of this yours?" "Yes," Julian replied, "but you can share it with me." Do you live here all by yourself? The simple question hit him squarely in the chest. Yes, I used to, he said. Before you, he thought. He pulled the covers up to her chin. Sleep well, Lily. You too, sir, she replied, her voice already growing drowsy. She turned on her side, burying her face in the soft pillow, and within seconds she was fast asleep, her small hand still clutching a corner of his cashmere shirt. Julian stood there for a long time, just watching her sleep. He turned off the lights, leaving only a small nightlight glowing softly. Then he walked back into the living room. His luxurious apartment, his pride and joy, looked different now. It was still vast, still magnificent, but the presence of the sleeping child in the other room had filled its emptiness with something warm and real. He stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the city he had conquered. He pulled out his phone, but instead of checking the stock market, he called his personal lawyer, the most powerful man in family law. Marcus, it's Julian, he said, his voice low and firm. I need you to do something. There's a little girl. Her name is Lily. I want to start the adoption proceedings, immediately. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Julian, do you know what time it is? Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life, Julian affirmed. Do whatever it takes. Contact social services in the morning. Find out her circumstances. I don't care what it costs. I want to make sure she is safe and that she stays with me. After hanging up, he called his personal assistant. Anna, I need you to clear my schedule tomorrow, and I need you to arrange for a personal shopper for children's clothing to be here at 10 a.m. Get everything. Clothes, toys, books, everything. And contact an interior designer. I want the East guest wing turned into a playroom. When the calls were done, Julian stood in silence, staring into the night. He had spent his life building an empire, accumulating assets and power. He thought that was how you erased the memory of a hungry boy on a Chicago street. But he had been wrong. The wealth had only made him lonelier. Tonight, by expending a hand to one small lost soul, he hadn't just saved Lily. He felt as though he had just begun to save himself. The boy inside him was finally at peace. Looking out at the city lights, Julian Vance for the first time didn't see numbers and opportunities. He saw a future, one filled with a child's laughter, with bedtime stories, and with pancakes for breakfast. And he knew with absolute certainty that this was the most valuable asset he would ever own.